The wind blew dry and cold across the Wyoming plains, whispering through brittle sagebrush and stirring the dust around the boots of a man who hadn't spoken aloud in 3 days. Jebediah Crane stood at the edge of the pit he'd spent hours digging. Behind the barn, a 6-foot-deep gash in the stubborn earth. He leaned on his shovel, chest heaving with exhaustion. At 72, he should have been nursing joints and tending to livestock, not clawing at the ground like a man trying to erase himself. But the ranch was empty now. No cows, no chickens, not even the loyal dog that used to follow him to the creek. All gone, sold off or buried. The sun hovered low, casting long, orange streaks across the field where wild grasses swayed like mourners in a forgotten funeral. A single wooden cross lay propped against the nearby tree. He'd carved it himself. Last winter, the same week he finished writing his will. It was time. No one would come looking for him. That was the point. 15 years ago, his wife Lorna had died during a snowstorm fell through the ice trying to fetch water from the frozen. Well, he never forgave the land for taking her. Never forgave himself for being away when it happened. He'd stayed on the ranch like a ghost, feeding bitterness and whiskey more than crops or animals. His brother tried to get him to sell and move into town, but Jeb was too proud, too broken. The house had turned into a mausoleum. He wiped sweat from his brow with a shaking hand, then glanced up at the sky. Soon, Lorna, he muttered. Soon. The .45 revolver set wrapped in cloth inside the saddlebag by the fence. He would finish the grave, clean up, write the final note, and then thunk. He paused. A strange sound cut through the dry air. Not wind, not a coyote, something heavier, human. Another sound, a soft cry. It was faint, but enough to make his ears perk. He squinted toward the gate, where the gravel road ended in a twisted coil of barbed wire and rusted metal. Something or someone was lying there. He dropped the shovel instinctively and stumbled forward, boots crunching dirt as he limped toward the noise. As he neared the gate, his breath caught in his throat. A girl, young, barely 20, if that, dirt-smeared and trembling, her long brown hair stuck to her face with sweat, and her belly round, swollen, unmistakably pregnant. She was unconscious, or nearly so. Jeb's hands hovered in the air. He hadn't touched another soul in years. His first instinct was to turn around, to let her be someone else's problem. But there was no one else. He knelt beside her with surprising speed. Miss, he croaked. No answer. He gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, eyes fluttering open for a moment, green and wide with terror, and then closed again. He cursed under his breath, lifted her in his arms. She was lighter than expected and carried her toward the house. As he passed the grave, he stopped briefly, glanced down, and whispered, "Not today." Then, the old ranch house hadn't seen company in years. Jebediah Crane kicked the front door open with his boot, cradling the unconscious girl against his chest. The hinges groaned like a warning, but he ignored it. Dust danced in the light filtering through the grimy windows, and the air inside smelled of pine, whiskey, and memories. He laid her down gently on the frayed couch by the cold fireplace, his hands trembling as he pulled a quilt over her. She was still breathing but shallow and ragged. Jeb stood over her, unsure of what to do next. He hadn't looked after anyone since Lorna died. Back then, a scraped knee or a sick calf was the extent of his care. This girl, though this was different, her face was pale and drawn. Dried blood crusted around her temple, and one hand clutched her swollen belly even in unconsciousness. "Lord help me," he muttered, then shuffled to the kitchen to fetch water. The sink groaned when he turned the knob, spitting and coughing. Before a slow trickle finally came, he filled a tin cup, returned to the living room, and gently pressed it to her lips. A few drops dribbled down her chin before she stirred with a whimper. Her eyes fluttered open again, greener now that he saw them in the light. She blinked, confused and frightened, and tried to sit up. That double quotes no, stay down, Jeb said, holding her shoulder gently. You're safe now. Where am I? She whispered. Voice cracked like parchment. My ranch, out near Cedar Valley. Her head lolled back against the cushion. How far from town? Nearest one's 15 miles. You walked here. She didn't answer. Her lips trembled. Then her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I just kept walking. I thought I'd make it further. Jeb sat down in the armchair across from her, wiping his forehead. His breath was shallow. She looked young enough to be his granddaughter if he'd ever had one. But all he could think was, why now? Why her? I was gonna die today, he muttered without thinking. She blinked. What? He rubbed his temples. Nothing. Just wasn't expecting company. For a long moment, silence filled the room, thick and awkward. Outside, the wind howled across the plain. She finally spoke, voice softer now. My name's Clara. Jeb nodded. Jeb, thank you for helping me. He gave a grunt that could have meant anything. Gratitude made him uncomfortable. He stood, walked over to the fireplace, and began stacking logs. I'll make a fire, he said. You're gonna need warmth tonight. As the flames crackled to life, Clara curled tighter under the quilt. She stared at the dancing light, her eyes distant. Your husband must have built this house, she said quietly. More to herself than to him. Jeb froze. My wife and I built it together. Clara glanced up, eyes full of something he couldn't read. She's gone. He gave a slow nod. 15 years now. I'm sorry. He didn't answer. He poked the fire harder than necessary, then walked over to the cupboard and pulled down a can of beans and an old pot. He hadn't made food for anyone else in years, but the rhythm came back surprisingly fast. She watched him from the couch, her expression softened, a mix of curiosity and wariness. Why were you gonna die today? She asked. Jeb's hand jerked, spilling a few beans on the floor. He didn't look at her. Wasn't your concern, he muttered. It is now. You saved me. He turned slowly, his face darkened by shadow. I dug a grave this morning. Clara, he said bluntly, had every intention of lying down in it by sundown. You show up, bleeding and pregnant on my gate like some kind of sign from God. I don't know what to make of it. Her eyes widened. I didn't mean to stop you. I know that. But maybe you were meant to be stopped. He didn't like how that made him feel, like her words were burrowing into a part of him. He thought long dead. He handed her the tin cup again. Drink. Slowly, Clara obeyed. She drank, then wiped her mouth with a trembling hand. I was running, she whispered. From what? From someone who wasn't going to let my baby live. Jeb stared at her. She continued. He said the baby wasn't his. Called me names. Said I was ruining his life. Then last night, he hit me hard. I ran. No bag. No coat. Just ran through the night till my legs gave out. She looked away, as if ashamed. You didn't deserve that, Jeb said gruffly. Clara gave a small, humorless laugh. I thought I'd die out there. I was ready for it. Then I saw your gate and thought maybe someone lived there. Maybe, her voice cracked again. Maybe I'd be found before I died. Jeb stared at the girl, the stranger who had ruined his plan. Undone years of isolation, with one collapsed breath, and something old stirred in his chest. Not pity, not even duty. Hope. And it scared him more than death ever had. He stood up. You can stay the night. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. Clara nodded. Thank you. As he turned to walk toward the hallway, she called out softly, Jeb. Yeah, I think you were meant to save me. He stopped, hand on the doorframe. The words echoed behind his eyes. Maybe, just maybe. He thought she was meant to save him too. Morning light crept slowly across the wooden floor of the ranch house. The fire had long since died, and the cold returned like an old enemy. Jebediah Crane stood at the sink, staring into a chipped enamel mug filled with black coffee. His hands, leathery and cracked, gripped it tightly. He hadn't slept all night. He listened to the wind and the girl's quiet breathing every time she stirred. He thought about that grave outside, thought about how close he had come to disappearing from the world, and how now he wasn't alone. Behind him, Clara shifted under the quilt. A soft moan escaped her lips. Then, slowly, she sat up, her hand pressed protectively to her swollen belly. Jeb turned, still breathing. I see. Clara gave a tired smile. I think so. I slept better than I have in days. You needed it. He poured another mug and brought it to her. She accepted it with both hands, the warmth soothing her shaking fingers. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. I can leave today if you want, Clara finally said, her voice fragile. Jeb raised an eyebrow. And go where? You planning on walking back into the hands of the bastard that hit you? Clara flinched, but didn't deny it. You're not going anywhere, he muttered. Not till you can stand without falling over. She nodded, eyes down. I don't want to be a burden. He barked a short laugh. You already are. But the world's full of burdens. You just happen to be mine for the time being. For a moment, Clara looked like she might cry, but she swallowed it and nodded again. A knock came at the door. Both of them froze. Jeb set his mug down and reached for the rifle by the wall. No one came out here, not unless they were lost or looking for trouble. He crept to the door and cracked. It opened just enough to peek out. A young man stood on the porch, clean-shaven, slick hair, and a nervous energy that didn't fit the dust-covered world outside. A shiny black truck sat on the dirt path behind him. Can I help you? Jeb asked. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sorry to bother you, sir. I'm looking for someone. A girl, pregnant, brown hair, about this tall. He gestured mid-chest. She ran away from home. We're real worried about her. Behind him, Clara had frozen like a deer in a trap, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth silently forming the word no. Jeb's eyes narrowed. Haven't seen anyone like that, he said flatly. This land's private. You'll want to turn around. The man glanced past Jeb's shoulder, trying to peer into the dark interior. You sure, sir? She's confused, not in the best mental state. We just want to help her. Jeb stepped forward, fully blocking the door now. Try the next ranch 10 miles east, and if I see her, I'll be sure to call someone. The man hesitated, then gave a stiff nod. Thanks, appreciate it. Jeb didn't close the door until the truck turned and disappeared down the long road, kicking up dust behind it. When he turned back, Clara had sunk into the couch, her face pale. That was him, she whispered. That was Derek. Jeb didn't speak for a long time. Then he set the rifle aside and walked to the window, watching the road. He found you fast. Clara nodded, shaking. He always said I belonged to him, that if I ever left, he'd hunt me down. I didn't think he meant it. Well, Jeb muttered. He meant it. He turned to her, eyes sharp now. The haze of despair that had hung around him yesterday was gone, replaced by a quiet intensity. You're not safe here anymore, but you're not going anywhere either. Not till we figure out a better plan. Clara tried to speak, but Jeb held up a hand. You gave me no choice but to live another day. So now I got no choice but to keep you safe. That's how this works. Her lips trembled. You don't have to protect me. Maybe not. But I will outside. The wind carried dust across the prairie. Inside, to broken souls sat an old wooden house, one trying to escape her past, the other trying to escape his own ghost. Neither succeeded that morning, but something had changed, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, frost clung to the window panes. Jeb sat at the kitchen table, sharpening a hunting knife with slow, steady strokes. Each scrape echoed through the quiet house like a ticking clock. Across from him, Clara picked at a piece of toast she hadn't touched. Neither of them had said much since the man Derek had come and gone. "You're still shaking," Jeb muttered without looking up. "I know. You're safe here. For now." He stopped sharpening, looked up. "I meant what I said, girl. He comes back. He won't get past me." Clara didn't answer right away. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a sip of water. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she finally asked. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to know your whole story to know what a man like that is." He tapped the blade's edge. "I was raised by one." She looked at him, surprised. Jeb leaned back in the chair, staring out the window. "My old man drank. Beat on my mama, my brother, me, whoever was closest. I ran the first chance I got. Joined a cattle crew at 16, never looked back." Clara's voice was soft. "Did you ever go back?" Jeb gave a humorless snort. "Not even for the funeral." They sat in silence for a while longer, the morning sun crawling slowly across the wood floor. Finally, Clara spoke. "I stayed with Derek because I didn't have anywhere else to go. My parents kicked me out when they found out I was pregnant. Church-goin' folks said I was a disgrace." Jeb grunted. "Ain't no shame in carrying life. Try telling them that." She swallowed hard. "I thought Derek loved me. He did at first, said all the right things. But once I started showing, everything changed. He got cold, then angry, then cruel. Last week, he said if I had the baby, he'd make sure neither of us made it far." Jeb's jaw clenched. "I believed him," she said. "So I ran." "Good." Clara looked at him. "I wish I was as strong as you." Jeb's gaze darkened. "I ain't strong. I was digging my own grave the morning you showed up, remember?" Clara's face fell. "I had it all planned. Quiet, clean, just me and the dirt. Figured I'd join my wife and be done with this place. Wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of waking up another day with nothing but ghosts." She said nothing, watching him with quiet understanding. "I couldn't save Lorna." He continued. "That guilt, it doesn't go away. You just learn to wear it like an old coat." He rubbed his hand over his face. "I keep wondering if she sent you." Clara blinked. "Sent me, like a warning, or a second chance." She hesitated. "Maybe I was meant to find someone who wouldn't hurt me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jeb stood. "Come on, I need help mending the fence." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure I'm up for that?" He nodded. "You're still breathing. That's good enough." Outside, the cold bit at their faces as they walked toward the north pasture. The wooden fence had collapsed into places, worn down by wind and time. Jeb handed Clara a coil of wire and a hammer. She held them awkwardly. "Never done this before. You'll learn." As they worked side by side, Jeb found himself talking more than he had in years. About Lorna's laughter, about the storm that took her, about the way the prairie used to bloom with wildflowers in spring. Clara listened with a soft attentiveness, like someone memorizing each word. When her back began to ache, Jeb insisted she sit on the overturned trough. He brought her water, then silently resumed the repairs. As the sun began to fall, Clara spoke again. "Do you ever wonder why some people are born into love and others into pain?" Jeb hammered a nail in hard. "Every damn day." She looked at him. "I want this baby to be born into love, no matter what it takes." Jeb paused, turned to her. "Then you already are strong." She smiled a small, tired smile, but real. They walked back to the house in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Inside, Jeb lit the fire again, while Clara boiled water for soup. Outside, the wind howled across the empty grave. It wouldn't be used anytime soon, not while hope still lived inside that broken house. By late afternoon, the sky had shifted. The horizon, once blue and stretched wide, now churned with dark clouds. A storm rolled in low and mean, the kind that sent animals running and made even seasoned ranchers uneasy. Jeb stood on the porch, one hand resting on the post, eyes narrowed at the sky. He muttered, "She's coming hard and fast." Behind him, Clara struggled to light the old oil lamp. The power had flickered twice, and by the look of the clouds, it wouldn't be long before the whole ranch lost electricity. "I've seen storms before," she said, trying to sound calm. "Back in Kansas, we had tornadoes. This isn't Kansas," Jeb said gruffly. "And that wind's got a bite." The first drop of rain hit the porch like a bullet. Then came another. Then a dozen more. By the time Jeb closed the barn doors and returned inside, the storm was screaming through the valley. Rain lashed against the windows. The wind howled like it was ripping through time itself. Clara sat wrapped in a blanket near the fire, staring wide-eyed. Her hands clutched her belly. Jeb noticed her posture right away. "You all right?" he asked, removing his soaked coat. I think," she gasped, pressing a hand to her side. "I think it's starting." Jeb froze. "The baby?" She nodded quickly, her face pale. "The cramps, they're coming fast." Jeb's heart slammed against his ribs. Of all the things he was prepared for, birth wasn't one of them. He hurried to her side. How far apart? 5 minutes, maybe less. He grabbed a towel and the emergency kit he kept under the kitchen sink. "You done this before?" She shook her head, breath short. "Have you?" He didn't answer. Truth was, he hadn't delivered anything but calves. "You're gonna be fine," he said, more to himself than to her. Lightning lit up the room, followed by a boom of thunder that rattled the windows. Clara cried out, grabbing the edge of the couch, her whole body tensed. Jeb knelt beside her, holding her hand. "Breathe, Clara, deep and slow." She tried. Sweat glistened on her brow. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. "You're strong," Jeb said. "You made it through the night. Through him, you can do this." She screamed as the next wave of pain hit, then collapsed back against the cushions. He wiped her forehead gently, his hands steady despite the storm inside him. Outside, the wind knocked over a barrel. The walls creaked. The old ranch house groaned. Under the pressure of nature's rage, inside, life fought to begin. Time became a blur of water, pain, and whispered encouragement. In our past. Then, as the storm reached its peak, Clara's cry broke through louder than any thunder and was followed by another sound. A wail, tiny, fragile. But alive. Jeb held the newborn in his trembling hands, wrapping the child in a clean towel. Clara sobbed from exhaustion, her face glowing with relief and disbelief. Is it okay?" Jeb looked down at the squirming baby, then up at her. "You have a daughter," he said quietly. Clara covered her face, laughing and crying all at once. Jeb handed her the baby, and for a long moment, neither of them said a word. The fire crackled softly. The storm began to fade, and inside that old wooden house, something sacred had taken root. Not just a birth, but a rebirth. A life that wasn't planned. A life that wasn't over. Not for Clara, and not for Jeb. Morning came soft and golden, like it didn't remember the storm that had ripped through the land just hours earlier. Inside the ranch house, everything was still. Clara slept curled on the couch, one arm wrapped protectively around her newborn daughter. The baby, tiny and wrapped in a flannel towel, breathed in gentle, rhythmic puffs. A small sound escaped her lips, more of a sigh than a cry, and Jeb froze in place, holding his breath as if the slightest movement might disturb that fragile peace. He hadn't slept. Instead, he'd sat in the old wooden chair by the fireplace, watching over them both like a silent guardian. His back ached, his eyes were dry, but his chest felt different, lighter. He didn't understand it yet, just knew that something inside him had shifted. He rose carefully, stepping out onto the porch. The land, soaked and steaming under the rising sun, glistened like it had been baptized. Mud filled the ruts in the road. Branches and debris littered the yard, and near the barn, something caught his eye: the shallow grave, still open, still waiting, but not for him. He walked toward it, shovel in hand. Each step was deliberate. By the time he reached the edge, the morning breeze had picked up, fluttering the tall grass around his boots. Jeb looked down into the hole he dug with death on his mind. Then he looked at the shovel, then back again. "I don't need you anymore," he whispered. And then he began to fill it, scoop by scoop, one heavy clump of dirt after another. He buried it all, not just the hole, but the man he had become in the years since Lorna's death. The silence, the sorrow, the self-hate, all of it went into the earth. He buried the bottle, too, the half-empty flask from the drawer in the barn, tossed it in like an offering, and when it was done, he stood for a long time, panting, staring at the newly covered ground. "Goodbye," he said, "to all of it." Later that afternoon, Clara stirred. She blinked, confused, before the sound of a soft whimper brought her fully awake. She looked down at the baby in her arms and smiled through the exhaustion. Jeb stood near the window, sipping coffee. He turned as she shifted. "You made it," he said. She chuckled weakly. "Did I? I feel like I got hit by a tractor." "You did good," he said simply. Clara looked down at her daughter. "She doesn't even have a name." Jeb set the mug down. What are you thinking?" "I always liked the name Hope." He nodded slowly. "Fitting." Clara looked up at him, eyes tired but bright. "Thank you, Jeb, for everything, for not letting me die." He didn't answer for a moment. "I buried the grave this morning," he said quietly. Clara blinked. "What?" "The one I dug for myself. I filled it back in." Her breath caught. "Why?" He looked at her, really looked. "Because someone reminded me there's still something worth living for." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at her daughter, then back at the old man in the room with her. "Do you ever think maybe we weren't meant to find each other, but needed to?" He nodded. "Yeah, I think about that a lot." For the first time in years, Jeb smiled. Not a faint twitch, a real one. "I was ready to die," he said, "and now I'm thinking about building a crib." Clara laughed softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I think she'll like that." Jeb stepped toward them and gently touched the baby's tiny hand with his calloused finger. The child's fingers curled around it like it belonged there. And maybe it did. Outside, the sun rose higher. The past was still there, buried beneath the dirt and the pain, but for the first time in a long while, the future felt possible. A week passed. The prairie, still soaked from the storm, burst into life. Wildflowers unfurled along the fence lines, and birds returned to the skies with songs that hadn't been heard in years. The ranch felt different, not just quieter or cleaner, but alive. Inside the house, Clara sat in the rocker by the front window. Baby Hope nestled in her arms. She hummed softly, one hand stroking the infant's soft black hair. Her cheeks had color now. Her eyes no longer carried the weight of fear, and though the bruises on her arm had faded only slightly, something deeper had already begun to heal. Jeb stepped onto the porch, wiping grease from his hands after oiling the hinges on the barn doors. He looked toward the horizon where the sun spilled over the hills like golden syrup. She's sleeping again, he asked, nodding at the bundle in Clara's arms. Clara smiled. Barely, but better. She'll get there, he said. Tough little thing, Clara chuckled. Like her godfather. Jeb snorted. Don't go slapping titles on me. You keep fixing things around here. You're gonna earn one. He shook his head, but didn't argue. Truth was, he hadn't worked this much in years. The barn was cleaned, the roof patched. Even the windmill he once thought useless now turned gently in the breeze. A crib sat near the fireplace inside, handmade from old cedar boards. It wasn't perfect, but neither was he. Still, it stood. Just like him. Clara rocked slower, then spoke quietly. I don't think he's done looking for me. Jeb's eyes narrowed. Let him come. I'm not saying I'm afraid, she said. But I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Jeb leaned on the porch railing. You didn't bring trouble. You brought purpose. She looked up at him, surprised. I dug a grave to die in, he said. You made me dig myself out. Silence fell, but it was a comforting kind. The wind rustled the trees, and the baby let out a soft coo. I was thinking, Clara said after a while, maybe I shouldn't just wait for him to find me. Jeb raised an eyebrow. I could file a restraining order or press charges. I still remember the bruises, the threats, everything. Maybe it's time I stopped running and started fighting. Jeb nodded slowly. Sounds like something a mother would do. She looked at him again and saw something in his expression that surprised her. Pride. That night, Jeb took down the old rifle from above the fireplace. He cleaned it, oiled it, and loaded it. Not out of fear, but out of readiness. He had something to protect now. Someone. He walked out onto the porch. Moonlight spilling across the land like silver paint. The wind had calmed. The world was still, and yet, he felt more alive than he had in years. The next morning, Clara stood barefoot in the kitchen, bouncing hope in her arms while coffee brewed. Jeb entered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep. She's a morning bird. He smiled at the sight of the two of them like they belonged in that kitchen all along. I was thinking, Clara said, maybe I'll stay here for a while. Help out around the ranch. Jeb blinked. You'd want that. I do. You sure? The road's long. You could leave tomorrow and vanish into some town where no one knows you. She shook her head. I don't want to vanish anymore. I want to build something. I want Hope to grow up knowing what love and safety feel like. And I think she could learn that. Here. He was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee. Then he nodded. Double quotes well, he said. I guess we better fix the chicken coop. Clara smiled, holding her daughter a little closer. Guess we better. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. The grave was gone. But life had taken root, and on a quiet stretch of prairie where a man once came to die, a mother and child and an old, broken cowboy had found something far rarer than peace. They'd found each other. They'd found a new dawn.